Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue Studio, I'm Justin Brady. You've probably heard about protests across the country against Elon Musk and Donald Trump. On one side, they're saving democracy. The other side, they're burning dealerships and causing violence and destruction and getting paid. Maybe the truth is a little bit more between those two endpoints, and we're going to figure out what that is today. But before we do, as a reminder, you go to iowapodcast.com, scroll to the very bottom, and you can get $30 if you buy a $100 e-gift card from Jethro's Barbecue. That's at iowapodcast.com. Scroll to the very bottom and get that. Michaelyn Mankel, the senior organizer with Food and Water Watch, joins us. They're one of the organizers of the anti-Trump, anti-Musk protests right here in Des Moines. Thank you so much for coming in the studio. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so it's, I think it's the national, and you can explain how this works probably better than I can, but it's a national organization called Hands Off, or a national movement called Hands Off.
Yeah.
And you're one of the local organizers partnering with Hands Off. So first, what we'll do is just explain to the listeners what this is and what the objective is in your own words.
Yeah, this Saturday, April 5th, will be the largest single-day protest since Donald Trump's inauguration. And we're marching to demand Trump and Musk take their hands off the programs that Iowa residents rely on. And our protest locally is targeting Representative Nunn with demands to oppose this billionaire coup and the far-right billionaire budget that he voted on in the House, and to reverse his support for dismantling programs and funding that people need to survive. Sure. So,
coup is a pretty strong word, and so we're going to dig into this and what the issues are and how you all feel about it. But as you mentioned, it's at Zach Nunn's office. He, of course, is at Capitol Square in downtown Des Moines. And so if Congressman Nunn comes out to meet everybody, I doubt, these days that's probably not the thing that goes on. But let's say he does, and he says, give me a checklist. Like, what are the specific things you want me to do? Like, everybody here protesting in Iowa, we're very much, caucus land. We love peaceful protesting here. What are those like bullet lists? Like, we want you to do X, Y, Z. What are those specific things?
Well, first would be have a town hall. Representative Nunn has not once had a public-facing town hall since he's been in office.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to meet him on Saturday would be a huge win, I think, for his constituents that are upset and angry about the decisions he's making as a representative. Our three specific demands are, one, to oppose the role that Elon Musk is playing, and to oppose having an unelected billionaire making calls and having his hands on the federal government. The second would be, again, to reverse his support for the House budget resolution that outlined $4.2 billion in tax cuts, mostly going to the wealthiest Americans. That'll mostly benefit corporations and the billionaire class. And three would be to stop participating in scapegoating politics. We want to see Representative Nunn stop attacking, voting for, advocating for legislation that targets his most vulnerable constituents, including immigrants, trans people, Black Americans, through the targeting of DEI programs. We want him to, stop participating in that and focus on his constituents, what we need, and making sure that we're not having programs and funds that help us meet our basic necessities taken away.
So everybody listening, that was my phone. It was not Michaelyn's phone. Rookie mistake. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, so a lot to get into there. Let's take them one at a time. what's the role of, because now I am not in the White House. I do not have White House connections. We've reached out to some members to be on the show. We'll let you know if that happens. But the White House has said Musk's role is advisory. And so I believe that advisors in this specific role have like a legal maximum of 130 days, something like that. And so I have heard the word like unelected. So what specific aspects of his role are over the line? Mm-hmm. Because from what I'm hearing, it's legal, and they're an advisory role. So they actually can't make any rules or they can't make any changes.
Yeah. Musk
and I'm talking about Doge.
He's been given access to incredibly sensitive information. And that includes information about where funds are being distributed and who is receiving benefits and aid. That's never really happened. We haven't seen an unelected person have access to the kind of information that Musk has. And we also know that his perspective on working people, on working families, is incredibly hostile. He's called anyone who receives benefits part of the parasite class. And, by and large, we don't think that he has a legitimate role to play in governing our country, and is a very dangerous actor in the White House.
Now, he has said anyone who receives government benefits as a part of the parasite class. Mm-hmm. We'll check that later. I have not, just to be honest with you, I have never heard that.
Yeah, this was something he posted on his public X account.
We'll look into it. I had no idea that was a thing. So tell me a little bit. This is what's interesting is you're an organizer with the Food and Water Watch. Mm-hmm. But Musk is an unlikely, at least maybe 5 years ago, an unlikely opponent because, leading the clean energy, solar, EVs. So how did your organization end up on the opposite side of this?
So we are a grassroots organization focused on a livable future, a clean climate, safe drinking water, and sustainable food system for all. And the cuts that Congress has outlined decimate programs that ensure clean water and safe food for people. And also, gut SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. All of these things are, work that we are focused on, and that he is proposing to cut.
Now, again, I'm unsure that they wanted to. I think one of the lines that they use a lot, and again, I'm not saying that this is true or not, but one of the lines they talk about is efficiency. And it's interesting that you bring up like food and water health, because here on one side you have RFK. We talked to Senator Tony Bisignano about this when he was in here, but you have RFK talking about food and water, clean water in the Trump administration. But your organization is saying, well, we oppose the Trump administration. So are there specific issues on food safety and water safety that you oppose that they're doing? Is it the fact that you think RFK is giving this all lip service and he actually doesn't believe it? What are those specific things you oppose?
The House budget resolution that they just voted on, one of the things that we were pushing back against in particular was the take lead out of drinking water. This was a national federally funded program that was designed to replace lead pipelines. There are, tens of thousands of lead pipelines still existing and in Americans' water supply. And the impacts of those are, completely detrimental to youth, to elderly. It's like a very dangerous thing to have your drinking water run through lead pipes. That's one particular example that we've been targeting Representative Nunn about. Mm-hmm. Not really sure about RFK, but I know, that is one example of this massive House reconciliation budget that we oppose.
And this is something that you want to get Representative Nunn on the record to say he opposes what
right.
exactly? That he is for a plan to remove all the lead-based pipes? Is that what needs to happen?
We do not want him to repeal the lead out of water program.
Okay.
It's a federal program.
Got it.
But we also, take SNAP, for example.
Yeah.
SNAP benefits help feed more than 40 million low-income people in the United States every year, providing an average of $212 a month per person. In Zach Nunn's own district here in Des Moines, 31,100 households rely on SNAP to put food on the table. Yet Nunn recently voted to slash SNAP benefits by $230 billion. And the House Agricultural Committee, on which he sits, will be charged with detailing those cuts. So the resolution has passed through the House outlining $2.2 billion in cuts for programs and federal funding, and $4.2 billion in cuts in tax breaks that will benefit largely wealthy people. And that is what we really need to see him reverse his position on. As the House in committees begin building out this budget, we want him to reverse his support for what the resolution outlined and fight to save vital programs that help fund basic necessities and keep his constituents alive.
Now, the website is very focused on Musk and very focused on Trump, not so much Nunn. The local organization is targeting Nunn. So is hands off, and the Food and Water Watch, is the protest more focused on kind of all of them? Or, because I guess I was under the assumption it was against Musk and Trump, because their faces are like everywhere on this protest.
Yeah, I think largely Musk and Trump are behind this far-right budget proposal. And we locally are targeting Representative Nunn because he was elected to represent us and because he voted in support of this budget reconciliation resolution and has supported cuts as a representative since he's been in office.
Now, the website mentions, and I think you touched on this briefly when you were listing some things, that Medicaid and Social Security are a concern.
Yes.
What are the concerns there specifically?
We don't want to see any funding taken away from Medicaid or Social Security. And both those programs, this resolution outlined massive cuts to both of them. We're also partnering with the local AFGE, I believe it's Local 867. Jeremy Maskey, the president, will be coming to speak. Overnight, about 1 million Americans had their bargaining rights stripped from them just last week. This is the American Federal Government Employees Union. And, those attacks on unions are also being championed by Musk and Trump.
Okay, so and again, you may have some data that I haven't seen yet, which is why you're in here. On the record, multiple over and over again, we've heard from the Doge team and also Bobby Kennedy that Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare are not being cut. And that's just what they've said. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but that's just what they've said. I think even recently, I don't know if I have the quote here. I don't think I have that with me, but they've said over and over that these programs will not be cut, but your concern is that they will be cut.
Yeah.
Why is there a discrepancy there?
I think it goes back to this resolution that the House just passed. The budget clearly outlines cuts to both of these programs. They're not going to be able to cut $2.2 billion in funding without touching Medicaid and Social Security.
So this is good because what you're saying is there are these massive cuts, and we don't think that they can do these massive cuts without actually cutting benefits. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, the pro-Doge group, I think Senator Ernst is in there, of course, Musk himself, who's running the Doge team, are saying, we're going to cut this stuff because of efficiency. We think there's a lot of fraud and abuse. And so you don't think there's fraud and abuse. You think they're just going to have to cut the programs themselves. This is where the disagreement lies, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what if there is fraud and abuse? I know they say there is. You're saying there's not. Is that not a good thing to cut the fraud and abuse? Right?
I don't think they have demonstrated how they plan to cut fraud and abuse without taking away benefits for everyone and without cutting back funding for everyone. And I think when it comes to efficiency, there are departments that could be looked at with much larger budgets.
Mm-hmm.
For example, our defense budget.
The big one, absolutely.
And the private contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking just for myself, I think that is a, budget that is riddled with inefficient spending and, would be a much richer place for this team to be looking for fraud, abuse, and ways to cut back on spending. That's where a majority of the federal spending goes. And every year that budget gets bigger. Yeah.
And I do believe they've addressed the bag of nuts and bolts for $30,000 or whatever. That stuff obviously needs to be looked at for sure. The one of the charts they showed, again, Doge team, was that there are a increasing amount of Social Security numbers being handed out to non-citizens, right? And so this is one of the things, I think I had it. So this is Senator Ernst. My oversight, and again, take it or leave it, but my oversight uncovered $5.4 billion in COVID loans issued to individuals using fraudulent Social Security numbers. And there's an influx of Social Security numbers being given to non-citizens. So in 2021, they say there were 270,000 Social Security numbers handed out and 2.1 million in 2024. So would this be something that your side, Food and Water Watch, hands off, is like, hey, it's a big if that's true, we agree that those Social Security numbers should be wiped off the map and the fraud and abuse should be removed. If that's true, would you agree that it needs to be adjusted?
I don't believe it's true. And I think there's also been some discussion about very young people receiving Social Security benefits. And I know from personal experience, those are often children whose parents have died. That is the situation in which a young person under the age of 18 is receiving Social Security benefits. I think, again, I don't believe it's true. I think jeopardizing the benefits for, the tens of millions of people that rely on these programs through the justification of efficiency is really dangerous. And again, these are the budget for Social Security, Medicaid is a drop in the bucket compared to the federal defense budget and other funding that the federal government distributes, largely to, weapons manufacturers in the form of foreign aid. And I don't really believe that the goal is government efficiency. I think the goal is to create a lot of chaos and to be able to make unprecedented changes to the way our federal government operates overnight. That is really what the goal is restructuring our federal government. That's outlined pretty clearly in Project 2025 and also in the conversations that Trump and Musk have had leading up to January, the inauguration. Yeah.
So, right now, the Social Security Administration has been projecting that they may need to raise the retirement age to 70, right? Because Social Security, I think we agree on this one, right? That Social Security is not in a good place, right? And that people's benefits, as it is right now, are severely threatened. Individuals like yourself and even me, there's probably little to no chance we're going to get Social Security at all.
Yeah.
So if there is the fraud and abuse, though, and we cut out the fraud and abuse. Again, I agree with you. I don't think we should take Social Security away from people we promised to. I think that's crazy. But if there is fraud and abuse, isn't it a good goal that maybe we can keep it at 65 if there is that amount? Like, is that a good goal?
Yeah, I think
Right.
it would be. I don't think they've demonstrated clearly that there is this widespread and rampant abuse that's jeopardizing Social Security as a program. And I think it's also true that the creation of Social Security was won by, mass movements of people fighting for a safety net when they were, being laid off, and when the workforce was unstable and there were no programs or support for Americans who had been working their entire lives to retire. And I think reform to Social Security could be a very good thing, but what's happening and the goal of what's happening right now is not to deliver more benefits to working Americans. It's to reduce the amount of federal funding that is going into ensuring our standard of living.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the concrete policy decisions they're talking about, the Trump administration's talking about, there's not necessarily there's not necessarily disagreement with the concrete stuff. I mean, I'm sure there is, but it's more of what they're not saying. Your group is reading between the lines and saying, hey, we know you're saying this out in the open, but here's what we actually believe. It sounds like that your disagreements are kind of over here, right? Here's what we actually think is going on. We know you're not saying it, but here's what we actually think is going on. It sounds like that's your position, right?
And if you look closely at the House resolution, the budget resolution that was passed, that is also where our objections are coming from. So
with that, if Congressman Nunn comes out and says, guys, I hear you. Here's my commitment. I'm not going to cut anyone's Social Security benefits. I'm not going to cut anyone's Medicaid or Medicare benefits. If it's an efficiency thing and we find some fraud, we're going to get rid of that stuff. But we're not going to cut people's benefits they've earned. If he would say that to the group, would anybody believe him? Because it sounds like the stuff they're putting on paper no one believes currently. And so if he were to say that to your group, do you think the group and yourself would accept that? Or would you say, yeah, but?
I think we would applaud him and hold him accountable through the coming months as the House works on putting together this budget.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's fair. And I hope we can see, how cool would it be actually if we started seeing like protests in this country where people were being more unified and having discussions. Mm-hmm. And I think that has a lot of weight on your shoulders, truthfully, as the local organizer. The national hands-off people, I was getting, just for context, I was getting like the mass texts, mm-hmm. Which is how I heard about this. And so I reached out to them. They reached out to an organizer. They reached out to you. But it does put a lot of pressure, no pressure, right? But it does put a lot of pressure on you. Yeah. That how cool would it be if a protest you organized and locals organized wasn't an angry thing, but was a point of unity and peace, and where people were like debating issues? I think that would be freaking amazing, truthfully.
Yeah, definitely.
So on the little the email chain to get to you, tell me a little bit about Hands Off and how you're affiliated, the Food and Water Watch, mm-hmm. and how you got connected to organize this event.
Yeah, so Food and Water Watch is one of about 100 national partners. You can look at who those partners are at handsoff2025.com. And we were asked to either mobilize to these events if there was already one on the map, or to organize a protest or event if there wasn't. There wasn't one on the map here in Des Moines about 3 weeks ago. So we filled out the form, put it on the map, and the response we've gotten, I've never had my expectations more blown away. As an organizer, we have over 1,400 people registered to attend, which is truly incredible. We had AFL-CIO and AFGE reach out to me and asked to be a part of this event. We're also going to have speakers who are representing the disabled community, Americans with disabilities, and we're also going to have a speaker representing the trans community here in Iowa. And I think this really will be a unified protest. There's a lot of different constituencies who've been impacted or who are afraid, both because of state level policies that have passed this legislative session and because of what's happening at the federal level. And yeah, it has been very overwhelming and a lot of pressure because I was expecting this to be a very small protest of, 50 to 100 people outside Representative Nunn's office, and we now are expecting over 1,000. And the plan has shifted a bit. We're going to be rallying outside of Nunn's office and then leading a march to the Iowa Capitol on Saturday.
And there is one of the things on social media that's thrown around a lot that I have yet to see any confirmation for is that your protesters, not your protesters, but these protesters are all paid to show up and bust in. How many of your protesters are paid to show up?
None.
Okay, so I wanted to get that on the record because this is something that's often thrown around, is that these people are being paid, and you're saying nope. So national, like the hands-off organization, that's not the name of the organization. What's the actual name of the organization?
That's the banner, and it's over 100 organizations: Indivisible, Move On, a number of unions and other nonprofit and advocacy groups have registered. Again, it's a big list. So
they've all formed Hands Off together.
Yeah. And I, as an organizer, I earn a modest salary to do this work full time and year round, but that salary is not enough to pay people to show up at a protest. And I can tell you that the unions are not paying people. Indivisible, Move On didn't reach out when we registered this event with a check or funds to pay people to show up. And yeah, over 1,000 people have registered, close to 1,500 this morning. And I can tell you, as the lead organizer, none of them have received any money.
So that Rolls Royce you pulled up in isn't, no, just kidding, totally kidding. It's a joke, everybody. Yeah. So Food and Water Watch, you have a nonprofit role there, and they're who pay you because it's a nonprofit. You get paid out of that. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the national organization's not paying you at all.
No.
They're just an organizing support. It does look like they're giving you a little bit of funding or support in some capacity because they're the ones sending out the texts, I believe, and the tech stuff.
Yeah. They've put on an organizing call. They paid for whatever this mobilized dashboard with all of these different events are being put up on. I know those digital platforms definitely cost money. They paid for the website domain, but they're not offering Food and Water Watch money to be a national partner. They're not offering us money to put on this protest.
And just last thoughts here. For anyone who doesn't know, this is hard. Doing interviews like this is not easy. It's very, very difficult. So I really appreciate you coming in here and having a dialogue.
Yeah.
It says a lot about you, and it's very, very difficult to do this. The last question is, do you officially, again, not a trick question, this is just a real question. I'm assuming you don't, because your website's plastered with this, I'm assuming you don't condone any of the violence that we have seen.
What violence have we seen?
Just national, like burning Teslas and shooting up dealerships and stuff like that.
This will be a nonviolent protest.
Yeah, but yeah, and so I'm assuming you guys condemn that kind of activity.
I don't know that we, as an organization, have issued a statement condemning. I, as an individual, don't engage in those activities and don't promote them as an organizer.
Sure, but and so not promoting them is one thing, right? But I'm assuming the organization or yourself condemn the violence that you have seen or any of that.
I don't know that we've issued a statement condemning the violence.
Okay.
I know that we don't engage or promote that.
Okay.
And we don't see that as a strategic way to engage the people that are being impacted or a strategic way to fight back.
Okay, fair enough. And then the other thing was, are we going to see any of the Nazi stuff at the protest, or is that also discouraged?
It's definitely discouraged.
Okay, got it. Cool. Because we've been seeing that nationally in some protests as well with Elon, Musk and Trump with like Hitler mustaches and Nazi stuff. So you're saying don't bring that to this thing. We're going to have a peaceful protest here. Yeah. I appreciate that. Michaelyn Mankel, Food and Water Watch senior organizer. Any final thoughts before we wrap this?
I think if you're feeling isolated or upset or powerless in this moment, that Saturday is going to be a very empowering event and a great way to get energized, to fight back, and to have some control over our government and our lives.
Michaelyn, thank you so much for coming on the show and coming on the Iowa podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.